We continue with the book of Ruth, picking up where we left off last week at chapter 3, verse 1. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Try to remember a time when you fell in love. Maybe it was summertime. Maybe you remember a warm evening spent walking through the park, hand in hand, with someone you'd had your eye on for a long time. And now you knew the feeling was mutual, and you were lightheaded and giddy with the new reality, love. Or maybe you were in an air-conditioned restaurant. A conversation started. "Tell me about yourself." And the next thing you knew, it was 5 hours later, and you regretted the early morning commitment that made you say goodnight before you wanted to. It was love. Or maybe you were watching the one you'd been married to for a long time already, and they were fixing a faucet, and it was a hot day, and it had been a frustrating project, taking longer than planned, requiring a second trip to the hardware store. You brought a cup of ice water, and your eyes met for just a moment, and there it was. You'd still do anything for one another. It's still love. In this morning's passage from the book of Ruth, we're given a window into an intimate moment. But what is it exactly? Is it the moment Ruth and Boaz fall in love? Is it the moment they know they belong together? What exactly happens on the threshing floor? The story is set in motion by Naomi. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law from different lands, different ethnic groups, different religions have been living in mutual support and commitment in Bethlehem. Their stomachs were empty, but now they are full. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Physiological needs come first, then the need for safety, then connection, love, family, marriage. Explicitly stating that the goal for Ruth must now be marriage, Naomi sends her daughter-in-law, washed and anointed, to the end of harvest celebration, with their kinsman Boaz as the object of Naomi's strategies. Naomi instructs Ruth, go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do. There are several ways we can look at this. Maybe what we are seeing is a planned seduction. Ruth is bathed and anointed. She's put on her perfume, taking care as to how she's dressed. Anyone who has been in love knows the ritual of preparing to spend time with the object of your affection. Choosing the right clothes, fussing with your hair, but trying not to fuss too much. This is all very familiar. Where the biblical narrative takes an unexpected jag is what Naomi suggests next. Don't approach him, essentially, until he's drunk and ready to go to sleep. Then lie down next to him. To be very serious, there's a specter hovering over this scene, the ghost of something else entirely. I've stated a couple times over these past 3 weeks that Naomi and Ruth have no options for employment open to them, but that is not true. There is a profession open to them, the oldest profession. And the hint, the threat of prostitution hangs around this scene like an unwelcome guest. And I promise you, anyone hearing this story or reading the scroll back in the time when it was written would have understood this fact very clearly. The actions Naomi urges Ruth to take with the specified goal of obtaining a marriage proposal from Boaz could easily be interpreted as solicitation, with Ruth as the prostitute and Boaz as the client. This is an extremely risky proposition. If you'd like to know all about the significance of the phrase uncover his feet, you can catch me at coffee hour or come to Bible study on Monday at 5. They know all about it. But this is not prostitution. This is not solicitation. Boaz is no client. And in fact, after she follows all Naomi's instructions to her, Ruth stops short. She stops short, stopping short, actually. She does not follow Naomi's instructions to wait, to be instructed by Boaz. Instead, she speaks. Boaz says, "Who are you?" And Ruth answers, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." We interrupt the flow of this sermon to bring you a brief piece of background information on that phrase, next of kin. According to the laws of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, close relatives must step up to guard the property rights of the family when there is a death. In this case, Ruth is marriageable, and there is, we learn for the first time right here, property associated with Ruth's dead husband. Property she cannot own outright because she is a woman. Next of kin is a legal designation. It means that Boaz is not only eligible, he's morally required to step forward, to keep the property in the family by marrying Ruth and claiming it. Back to the sermon. Did you notice what just happened in this scene? In this story, believed, supposed to have taken place something like 3,500 years ago, a woman has proposed marriage to a man. Did you notice that that happened? God is said to spread a cloak over God's people. Repeatedly throughout Scripture, you can find it in Psalms, you can find it in Ezekiel. In Hebrew, the word is wings. Spread your wings over us. It's a metaphor for complete care and protection, an act of love, an act of nurture. When Ruth asks Boaz to spread his wings over her, she's asking him to care for her, to protect her, to marry her. And she's doing it in language that deliberately ties Boaz's action to God's love as an act of caring and protection. The Hebrew word for this is chesed. It can be translated love or loving kindness or faithfulness. Chesed is the kind of love God has for us. And Boaz's answer? He says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter." This last instance of your chesed, here translated loyalty, is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. There's that word again, chesed. Love, loving kindness, faithfulness, the kind of love God has for us. And it seems like a good time to notice here, this chapter is usually portrayed as an attempt to get Boaz to save Ruth, and by extension to save Naomi and their family's property and heritage. But here Boaz, with incredible grace and humility and honesty, points out a poignant truth. Ruth is saving him as well. He reveals that he thinks of himself as less worthy, maybe less desirable. He is fully honored. I wonder, do you think maybe the best relationships are the ones in which both parties believe themselves to be the lucky one? Can you remember a time when you realized this was the person you wanted to spend your life with? And it wasn't because they were beautiful or buff or even smart or brave, although maybe those factors were present, but simply because you could see their goodness shining through, their heart. When Ruth looks at Boaz, she sees a man who didn't chase a foreigner, a stranger, away from his field, but provided for her safety as well as for her empty stomach. When Boaz looks at Ruth, he sees a woman who devoted herself to the well-being of her widowed mother-in-law, despite her own self-interest, and who even in this act, this bold, daring marriage proposal on the threshing floor, continues to care for Naomi. Boaz urges Ruth to sleep. Because the author of Ruth is a brilliant storyteller, the happy ending, the fullness and healing the reader is longing for, is not so quickly or easily accomplished. There's a twist. There's another closer relative, and this has to be dealt with. Boaz, mindful of the conclusions that might be drawn if anyone were to see Ruth leaving the threshing floor in the wee hours of the morning, helps her to leave undiscovered. Still, the atmosphere is light and the symbolism is heavy. Boaz loads Ruth down with grain to take home to Naomi. Seed, fertility, fullness of every kind are promised. Ruth leaves, we have to believe, with a heart as full as her cloak. Naomi's question to Ruth upon her return home is translated in our Bibles, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" But the Hebrew is much more spare and enigmatic. "Who are you, my daughter?" she asks. Who is Ruth, now that she has returned home from this assignment? Is her reputation intact? Did Boaz understand what she was angling for? Has she returned home a woman promised marriage or not? Ruth's response, if the text actually reports it totally, is equally spare and equally enigmatic. He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. If Naomi's question and ours is, what happened exactly? It goes unanswered. Some things are better left a mystery. What a night. An assignation on the threshing floor full of sexual tension and anticipation, and yet it carries with it even more pressing questions of long-term safety and well-being, commitment, life and death, which, if you think about it, is true of every relationship of deep commitment, certainly of every marriage. I have a minister friend who, in her wedding homilies, likes to remind marrying couples that they make their promises in the face of death. That despite the relative ease with which people can change their minds and go their separate ways, in the moment of marrying, we commit ourselves to staying until either they or their spouse are widow or widower. Love is stronger than death, the Song of Songs reminds us, and passion as fierce as the grave. In love, we set a seal on one another's hearts. It isn't easily erased. Much like the love of God. God sets a seal upon our hearts and our lives too, and God's passion, without a doubt, is fiercer than the grave. And God cares about us. Our lives and our loves matter to God. In all their messiness and unpredictability and moments of embarrassment and grace. Dr. William Williman wrote a gorgeous essay on weddings and marriages, and he concludes, our God, thank God, does not wait until we get our lives cleaned up and aesthetically acceptable, until we know what we're getting into, until all the psychological factors indicate that we are ready to mate, and until we figure out the real meaning of what it means to love another human being forever. Our God, the one who began his ministry of all places at a wedding, entered the flesh, the tackiness, and the transitoriness of it all, and said, strange as it may seem to us of little faith, that our human unions are of divine consequence. God's hand continues to quietly guide the characters in our story. Next week, all will finally be revealed, but we can already see the ending, like a well-plotted romantic comedy. We see it in Ruth, her cloak full of grain, moving quietly through the mist of an early morning to show Naomi the promise of what lies ahead, this very human union that is most certainly of divine consequence. Thanks be to God. Amen.